Hey, gang. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Try Not to Curse. Elizabeth Marvel here with you. I am sitting down today with my friend Sara. I've been trying to get her on the pod for some time, but as you guys know, scheduling issues abound. But we are here. We're going to talk about a couple of different things. But Sara, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. I do appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so sorry it's taken this long to get here.
Girl, please, it's okay. I appreciate that you haven't just said, you know what, it's just not happening. So it's all fine. But I want to talk about, because I wanted you on this podcast because I think you have a really, really interesting story. Your background is really unique to me. And when people meet you now, I don't think anyone initially would suspect the type of person you are, the type of person you were 10, 20 years ago. So just touch base with me. Tell me, where would I find an 18-year-old Sara?
Well, I guess we'll rip the Band-Aid off and just start by saying I am 39. so just to give context. So 18-year-old Sara, so 20 years ago, a little more than, a little less than 20 years ago, I was in a really different place. And I will say now it's almost hard to bring it back that far because I was working full time. I had aspirations of going away to school, but then we had some family circumstances that, really just kind of, brought it to my attention that it was better for me to stay local. I had aging grandparents, and I just couldn't imagine not being there for them, in their final years. And so I had originally planned to go away to school and then decided kind of in the 11th hour to stay local. And so I had a really great job. I was working in a law firm. I was an executive paralegal. I had kind of arrived professionally, especially for someone of my age and lacking any kind of continuing education. And so I figured, you know what, let me stay working. I really love money. I love the finer things. I always have. I mean, I like good food. I like getting a massage when I want to. I like being able to spoil friends and family. I like being able to have a nice car. I like being able to have choices, and money's always given me choices. So I said, you know what, I'm going to stay working. I'm going to go to school full time at night. And luckily I had a flexible schedule where I was able to kind of take some independent studies and do some things a little unconventionally. And 20 years ago, the college landscape was much different than it is today. So I was working full time, going to school full time at night. And then I was waitressing and bartending Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I also will point out that I had a fun hobby that most people don't suspect of me. And that is I used to drag race. And so cool. I had a number of different race cars. And it was, I was not a girly girl. I never wore makeup. I never was into, anything girly. I kind of just shied away from. I was way more comfortable under the hood of a car, rebuilding a carburetor than I was dealing with most humans.
Yeah.
And in my day job. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that for a little bit. How did you get into drag racing?
My dad actually drag raced.
Oh, no kidding.
Not professionally, but just as a hobby. And so I kind of followed in his footsteps, and I just had friends that, because of my dad, like, his friends' kids. And it was just kind of part of our family culture in a way.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And so it's kind of something my dad and I also did together within that circle of friends, which was really cool. And I loved it, and I learned a lot. So that's kind of how I came to be there. But that's also, I want to point out, it's also one of my reasons why I loved money so much was drag racing is not exactly the cheapest hobby you could have.
Right.
So, you're looking at like, okay, I want to shave a tenth of a second off. Well, every 100 pounds is a tenth of a second. So, okay, let's get fiberglass doors. And that's $3,000,
Oh, wow.
So that is, there's definitely a monetary investment. You need trailers to get to the track. You need trucks to get to the track. Insurance, and it's inevitable that you're going to get to the track and all of a sudden you're going to need an alternator. And
And was it only like local races or did you go out of state? I know nothing about drag race culture. I know I wouldn't even know where I could see a drag race anywhere around here. So just give me some more info because this is like, now I'm just so fascinated by the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, so we used to, I mean, there's no, at that time, and I don't remember what years things closed historically, but at that time, 20 years ago, there were no drag strips in Connecticut. So we would go, I mean, fairly local. I mean, Lebanon Valley, New York, Atco, New Jersey, Englishtown is one of the more well-known ones if you follow the sport. There's Gainesville, Florida. I mean, there's a number of different, drag strips in the country, but then you have to, you kind of get to traveling, and then it's like, okay, we got to leave at 4:00 in the morning to get down there for 7, 8, 9 o'clock, and a lot of times there's hotels involved, and so the expense is tremendous. It's not a cheap hobby.
Yeah, and what do you get if you win? I mean, is there money that changes over? Or is it just a trophy, just bragging rights?
All of the above.
Okay.
I never won any kind of major money or anything major.
Yeah.
It really was truly a hobby. I mean, people do make it a profession. People get sponsors. People do all that stuff. We just really enjoyed it. It was just really a bonding. But it was cool. I mean, I was a girl that would, most people didn't realize that I, was a girl. So I'd get out of the, car and, take my helmet off, and all this long blonde hair comes down, and people are like, oh, I just got beat by a girl. So,
well, but I would also imagine there's probably not a lot of women that do that. And certainly not then either. Yeah.
Definitely less. Yeah. I mean, now more so, and you've seen some famous, car drivers in all different things, drag racing, NASCAR, all that. But no, I mean, it's still predominantly male. So it was fun.
And so given all of that, tomboy, drag racing, high-end law firm, what are we doing with ourselves these days? What do we do now?
So I'll take you a year after 18.
Okay.
So a year after 18, I was 19. And I was in a place where, again, working full time, going to school full time, but I always had, and even though I made good money, I kind of always had a little more month than money, right? I wasn't as financially flush as I wanted to be.
Sure.
And sometimes I felt like I was kind of taking 2 steps forward, 5 steps back. I would, and some of it was my choice. It was like, ooh, got some savings, buy a towel induction hood for the car, or, we need new whatevers, or, I want to buy a welder, cool stuff like that. So sometimes it was self-inflicted. Sometimes it was, I got a fender bender just driving normally, not drag racing, but like a normal fender bender. And now I have a, $1,000 deductible, say, or, an unexpected expense or a medical bill. So I just kind of felt like I wasn't as secure financially as I wanted to be. So I was waitressing, and this lady came up to me. I had just served her party for her kid's birthday party, and it was a larger party, tipped very generously. And she said, "You have gorgeous eyes." And I said, "Well, thank you." And this is like really awkward. I'm like, okay, right. And she said, could I feature you in my portfolio? I'm an independent beauty consultant with Mary Kay. And I was like, oh, no. Mary Kay's your grandma's makeup. I'm not getting sucked into a pyramid scheme.
Right.
I don't even like makeup. I don't like women. Everything about it was just like negative.
I don't like women. That's the best. I don't even like women.
It's like, I hate everybody. I'm not interested, right? And I also had this stigma, I'd be chopped up and put under the floorboards, a Poe poem, where it's like the beating heart, So something about her, I just felt very called to, trust her. And she was so genuine. I said, all right. So I went on my lunch break a couple days later, and I remember at my law firm leaving the address of where I was going. This was 2004, before we had location tracker and all that stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
So, and I'll actually be celebrating my 20th year in Mary Kay next month. So it's ironic. So she, I trust her, and I said to my coworker, I said, hey, listen, if I'm not back in an hour and 15 minutes, this is where I was. Right. And so I had a lot of fear, but I fell in love, and I did not expect that. I fell in love with how I felt. I fell in love with how I was treated. I wasn't looked down upon because I was a woman. I wasn't looked down upon because I was younger. I wasn't looked down upon because I didn't wear makeup and have a fashion sense. She met me where I was.
Yeah.
And I thought, women need this.
Yeah.
Like, women need this across the board. And so I wanted products, but I couldn't afford them. And that kind of bothered me. Like, I wanted just some good, decent skincare. And Mary Kay is not particularly expensive. It's very comparable. But it was that moment when I was taught how to do something and I realized I couldn't afford it that made me kind of go, something's got to give. I'm working like a dog. I'm working 100 hours a week, it seems, between school, work, the unpredictability of working in a law firm. By the way, I was with criminals, so they're not exactly like the most, predictable population. So it was unpredictable hours. It was, late nights. It was, there were trials. There were literal trials. And then waitressing and bartending. It was Friday night. You got to get there at 4:45 before the dinner rush, and then you're doing side work till midnight. And then you leave and you just start all over again. So I was like, I am killing myself, and I can't buy some freaking skincare.
Yeah, and you're only 19. Yeah.
And I was on my own. I didn't have the cushion of living at home with my parents. And so I was like, you know what? I might as well just try Mary Kay. And I almost was like, what? It was like out of body. I'm like, this is so not me. Like,
yeah.
Okay. But I love the product and I love the culture. I love that Mary Kay was built on the golden rule. I love that it was, God first, family second, career third. I'm personally a Christian. I always have been. And that was just not something you saw in the legal field. It was not something you saw on most college landscapes. It was not something that was prevalent, certainly not in the restaurant industry. And it was just a breath of fresh air. And I love that there were no quotas, because that was my biggest thing. Like, how am I going to do this? There's no quotas, whatever.
Right.
So I said yes. And I figured, I'm just going to give it a try.
Yeah.
And so that brings us to you.
Well, and that's why I wanted to have you on. So you guys, this is Sara. She is my Mary Kay director. As I mentioned in my episode when I was speaking with Erica, I am a rep for Mary Kay. And Sara and I had met 3 years ago now. And I the reason I wanted Sara to come on is exactly that, because I didn't want her to start off by saying, oh, I'm a director with Mary Kay, because of all of those preconceived notions that everybody has right away. No one would suspect that I am a Mary Kay independent beauty consultant, but I have been for 3 years. The exact same thing. I wanted really good skincare. I struggled with skin issues my whole life. And then, my best friend Tammy's daughter, Hannah, showed me some stuff. She was a consultant. And I said, I really like this. The price points, like you said, are reasonable. And I just got in because, you get the 50% off discount. So I said, let me get in just for the discount. I was in no way interested in selling the product. I am not a salesperson by any means, but it was just one of those where I was like, I'm doing this for me, and whatever comes with it is just a really nice bonus. So I just wanted you to share your, so to speak, origin story, but I also wanted you to be on here because I feel like direct sales gets such a bad rap, and you are an absolute success story. And I think it's important that people hear that, rather than, who do we hear from typically? It's usually somebody, oh yeah, I tried Mary Kay for a couple of years, and then I fell out of it, or it just wasn't interesting, or I couldn't make it work, or what have you. And, that's typically what people hear, time and time again. Or, the stereotypical, oh, my friend from school is selling X, Y, and Z on Facebook, what have you. But like you said, you've been doing this now almost 20 years, and you're kicking ass. and I mean,
are we trying not to curse? Can I be real on this?
You can be totally real here. We try, but sometimes, we have those moments. Yeah. And that's okay. So what does it mean now to be a director in Mary Kay?
So to be a director basically means that I have the honor of leading women. And every beauty consultant has their own reasons, their own seasons, their own personalities, their own goals. And I think one of the big things is success is not uniform. You know, I have consultants that say, hey, listen, I love being part of this. I love being part of the fellowship, the sisterhood, the camaraderie, the empowerment, the community. But I also love giving that to others. And some women want to just make $50 a month to go out for margaritas and tacos with their girlfriends and not take it out of their family budget. Some people are beating inflation right now. I mean, right? Like the cost of groceries is astronomical.
Yeah.
So I have women that are just kicking up their business a little bit because that grocery bill is, you know, rising. Electric bill. I mean, we sat down, you know, and I always say we are a very flush family financially, thanks to Mary Kay. Not thanks to Mary Kay, the company, thanks to my hard work in running a business. I have to be careful in how I word things.
Right.
Mary Kay doesn't pay me. I'm a 1099 independent contractor, but thanks to this business and the opportunity, we're very comfortable. But it was funny, on New Year's Day, January 1st, I'm sitting down, everything kind of dust settled for the holidays, quiet, and I get my electric bill emailed to me. And it was like through the roof because of all the Christmas lights. I literally looked at my husband at 6:30 at night and said, take it all down. That's it, we're done. So I always say, if a family as flush as we are, and I mean, not to say that there aren't struggles and moments or leaner months or anything like that, but you know, if we have those moments where we're trying to cut back, imagine how a struggling family, a single mom, a widowed mom, you know, even just a young person trying to get their bearings, imagine how somebody less affluent is feeling right now. And that's really where my passion lies, is helping women start businesses. And amidst this landscape where everybody's going to be an Amazon influencer and a, you know, digital marketer and all these things, it's like, this is a physical business with it's not a concept. It's an actual product with an actual company that's been around for 60 plus years now.
Yeah.
With values. Why would you not want to be a part of that? Right? Like I always say, nobody wants to have acne and nobody wants to be ugly. Like,
right.
There's something for, and nobody wants to be stinky. So like, it is what it is. And if you saw me right now, I mean, I know you're not going to show the video on here, but I look, disastrous, but
you look like you're home right now. That's okay.
I am home. and I am home. And I know you wanted to talk about this, so I don't know if you want to ask me or if you want me to bring it up, but I am home and I do something very important at home other than home work.
Yes. Yes. You are a homeschooler. Your kids are homeschooled. And I do want to touch on that for sure. But I still want to, so again, for me, so my, like I said, my journey with Mary Kay was I just wanted 50% off the really amazing products. So again, you guys, I don't wear makeup. I own makeup. You see me in it maybe once, twice a year. I have 2 weddings this year. Those are the 2 occasions you're going to see me in makeup. So when people see me, that's not, they certainly wouldn't assume. But again, my skin is amazing. I smell good all the time. And I do have customers. So on occasion, I'll get a couple bucks here or there, whatever, like I said. But as Sara was saying, the sisterhood, the camaraderie, the connections, all of these bonuses kind of came along with joining Mary Kay and getting in on the action. And it's, you know, and again, like I said, I'm not a salesperson. I wasn't in this to make money. Some people are. Some people have that motivation. Some people need to. I'm in a good place where I can just continue to get my 50% off skincare and keep the couple customers that I have happy and their products continue, you know, being shipped to their home. But it's really more for me. It's the sisterhood now, and it's the connections that I have made, and hearing other people's stories and supporting other people and what they have going on in their lives, and all their very unique stories. And I just it's been so fulfilling, and it's been a really nice 3 years of just making new friends and continuing to forge those friendships and keep those bonds growing and making them stronger. But again, like in your situation, it's also afforded you the luxury of being able to homeschool your kids and have this quality time with your children as they're growing up and figuring out who they are and what their interests are. And I did want to talk to you about that because, again, you're the first parent I've had on the podcast that has gone through the homeschooling thing. And my thought about homeschooling was that parents just said, I'm keeping my kids home and I'm going to teach them what I want to teach. But that's not the case. Like the government is involved. The state does have some guidelines and some requirements. So walk people through that. If somebody is interested in potentially homeschooling their kid, what do they need to do in order to make that happen?
So first of all, I mean, I never dreamed of being a homeschool mom.
Sure.
So that, when I decided to take Mary Kay full time, it was actually because I wanted to have kids, but I wanted to be a present mom. I always thought I'd be the room mom and the PTA mom. And my kids were in public school for up until the pandemic. And I'll bring you there in a moment. But,
sure.
It was Mary Kay that really gave us the opportunity to do that. I needed to, when I finished school, I decided I didn't want to practice law. So I got this big fancy degree, never actually used it, because I had met my husband. And at that point, I knew we wanted kids. And I was just seeing the women that were working full time that were outsourcing parenting. And that is not a slight to women that do that, but that just wasn't what I personally wanted for our family.
Yeah. Well, and it's choices that society forces us to make.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think, I never wanted to do Mary Kay, but I fell in love with it because I gave it an opportunity. And sometimes society does force us to make certain choices, but sometimes we want everything to line up perfectly. And sometimes, I was just talking to a mom and she was like, I would give everything to be home with my kids. I said, well, why don't you let me show you how to run a business? She goes, oh, I don't want to do that. I said, okay, so you are choosing. That's a choice, right? Yeah. So we are where we are by the choices we make or the choices we allow other people to make for us. And so I just knew that I'm very independent and I don't want other people telling me how to raise my kids or my family. And so I wanted to be a present mom, but things like family dinner were really important to me. Being able to support my husband in, his endeavors. And it was because of Mary Kay that, my husband's an architect by trade, and has owned construction companies and is in the construction industry. And it was in 2008 that we really had a wake up call, when he lost his job because of all the residential and the economic issue, the housing crisis.
Yeah.
And, if people aren't building, there's nothing to architect.
Sure. Yeah.
And I know that's not a verb, but we'll use it as one today. And so, basically we were just starting our family. He came home, I always joke, he came home with a pink slip and I came home with a pink stick.
Oh,
and
boy.
It was like, we're having a baby.
Yeah.
and he looked like, he blanched and he was like, what are we going to do? I said, Mary Kay's what's paying all of our bills. My Mary Kay business is what's paying the bills.
Yeah.
Do what you need. Do what you want. Do what makes you happy. He had a terrible commute every day, a lot of pressure. And so he took another path that made him happy and fulfilled parts of him. And we even just went through that last year. He went through another job transition, and it was because of my Mary Kay business and the due diligence I've had for 20 years that allowed for him to have an income disruption, but our family lifestyle stayed the same.
Yeah.
And so I have always really appreciated that. And so take you to the COVID pandemic. That was, we were a little, my kids are now 14 and 12. And so back then they were in third grade and fifth grade. So enter January 2020, 4 years ago today, we had a couple things happen. We had a daughter that was diagnosed with something called viral induced rhabdomyolysis. There's 17 people in the world that have it. And it basically means that every time there was a virus, my daughter got sick. And she got sick, but she was hospitalized. Her CK levels would rise and it would eat away her muscles and her appendages.
Oh my goodness.
So she was hospitalized 4 to 5 to 6 times a year because she would get a cold, a flu, normal typical things.
Yeah.
And so, so this pandemic happened, and so that's my daughter. My son, on the other hand, was a horrible test taker. Brilliant kid, charismatic. They called him the mayor, smart as a whip, but couldn't take a test for love or money.
Yeah.
And so the way the school system's structured, and listen, I think that the school system can work great for certain families. I think private school is great for certain families. I think homeschooling is a great option for certain families. So this isn't, and many of my best best trusted friends. You know, if I die, the girl who gets my kid, she's a teacher. Like, I am not in any way anti-teachers or anti public school. I am kind of anti-institutional, but we'll get into that in a minute. So I don't know how political you are to get here.
It's okay.
It could be a
well,
whole
no,
other
but you wanted to do what was best for your family and for your kids' needs.
Yeah,
and
you're so diplomatic.
And that's what all parents want. But that's what all parents want. And
yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, so our son, you know, was told by his last teacher, you're never going to read. You're going to summer school. You're going to stay back. And it really rocked him.
Yeah.
In a confidence way. And I didn't see that till a very long time after. I was just like every other mom, like, okay, there's intervention. We got to get tutoring. We got to do this. We got to do that. We got to get those test scores up. Teach to test, teach to test, teach to test. Because that is your metric of success and value and worth in the public school system.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's what everything is based on. It's what federal funding is based on. It's what positions are based on. And it is what it is. Whether you agree with it or disagree, it is what it is.
Yeah.
So COVID happened and we had just taken some standardized tests. I remember what they're all initialed, lots of acronyms. And they say, well, your kid's looking at summer school. And I remember being so pissed off because he really wanted to go to this camp. And I'm like, he can't go to camp and go to summer school.
Right.
And so COVID shut everything down. The virtual world, the new year of the virtual world was just a disaster zone, right? I had teacher, you're making $110K a year and you're on a Zoom for an hour and then you're going to tell my kid he's expected to stay up to bar.
Right. Right.
Okay. So I was like, all right. So I started talking to some friends that had homeschooled, and my opinion of homeschoolers was like Amish people in jumpers, like from society.
Right. Sure.
Yeah. That's not going to work for me. Like, I'm not Amish. I drive a pink Cadillac, for crying out loud. Like, there's nothing Amish about this. Right? Like, I like the finer things. I like electricity. I don't know. Few little luxuries. And I also thought like homeschool kids would be weird. Like, they had no social. Their parents were like weirdos keeping them at home.
Yeah. That was always my assumption with homeschool too, is how do you make friends? How do you meet people?
Yeah.
How do you know how to socialize and properly communicate outside of your little bubble? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started talking to some moms, and one of the things that kind of stood out to me was that Connecticut's homeschool laws are actually very free and flexible. The Connecticut believes that it is the parent's job to raise the children.
Okay.
And the way our Constitution of Connecticut is written is basically, and I'll paraphrase and don't take this legally and literally, but you can read it yourself. But basically the gist is it's a parent's job to raise their kids. And if they don't want to do that, then there's a public school. It's the only state constitution that's really written that way. And you can look up Connecticut general statutes. I think it's section 10-184.
I promise you, I was not going to test you on that.
Look that up. Yeah, you might, right? Somebody listening to this is going to I don't know. I feel like it's such a controversial topic too, because it's a hot button topic and people want to know, but there's so many people that are also interested in homeschooling because of the current climate on a million different levels, whether it's school safety, gun violence, whether it's what they're teaching that you may or may not agree with, whether it's value-based, moral-based, whatever, all the things, right? So, if I started asking around, I was like, hey, what about this homeschooling thing? Private school really wasn't an option for our family. There really weren't any that I agreed with fundamentally, that if I was going to make that move, I didn't see the value for dollar, just for us personally. So, and I wasn't paying $70,000 a year to educate my kids in a potentially subpar education setting.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right. So I looked at my husband. I said, how do you feel about me homeschooling? He goes, how are you going to handle that with a full-time career? You're running a multi-million-dollar organization. Like, how are you going to do that? And I said, I'm a master at time management. And he goes, well, if you think you can, let's try it for the year. So we did. And all of a sudden, my son, about 6 months in, was reading 2 grade levels above where he was supposed to be.
Oh, that's awesome.
And my daughter, and she got COVID, she got the flu, she got all the things like we all did, and she didn't have any rhabdo attacks. So during her annual appointment with the biochemical geneticist at Yale, I said, I just have a theory, and I don't know anything about doctoring at all. I don't even know the right use of the words.
Right.
But if, a lot of the schools are old buildings, especially where I live.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of concern about mold. They put out these reports and they're very open about it. Like, there's mold in the schools. We're doing construction. We're going to mitigate this, blah, blah, blah. I said, is it possible that mold is affecting her immune system and triggering this rhabdomyolysis or myolysis, depending on how you pronounce it, depending on the doctor you talk to?
Yeah.
And she said, that's something we'll never be able to prove, but it's a very viable thesis, hypothesis. And I said, okay. And so at the time, I just kind of let it go. And it wasn't until really last year where I realized, wait a second, we went from having 4 to 6 full-blown hospitalizations at Yale Pediatrics a year to her last one being January 2020.
Wow.
And so I thought, listen, there's that, right?
Right.
And now I know I could transfer her into a building that's new and there's construction. I know that. But really where homeschooling fell into place for me was within being able to play to my kids' strengths, teaching them how in a way that is going to resonate for them, all the learning styles. I feel like, unfortunately, the way the public school climate has been, it's a very much trying to fit square pegs into round holes. If you're the round hole and the round peg, then you're good and you're golden. If you're more of the square peg in a round hole, then you get left behind, whether you're above average, below average, whatever that is. You oftentimes get left behind, and there aren't a lot of, there's not a lot of freedom. I also wanted to travel. I want to see the world. So, we, amidst the pandemic, rented an RV and took off for a month and did the Grand Canyon. We believed kind of in more family time, kind of getting out of the rat race a little bit.
Yeah.
But also, and if you don't want to go here, you don't have to.
It's okay.
I'll pause if you want to edit this
it's
out.
Okay. Go ahead.
But there was a political component for us.
Sure.
And whether you're right side or left side, I grew up in the era of my dad was a Republican, his best friend was a Democrat. They'd be at the table and they'd have healthy conversation and respect.
Yeah.
Right. Much like you and I have had, we're very different, right?
Yeah.
And I started to see this division amidst COVID, right? And this divisiveness and this vitriol and this hatred. And I just thought, this is not, and again, I mentioned earlier, I'm a Christian. I just thought, this is not God's intention. Like, I don't want to put my kids into a place where anger and divisiveness are promoted, or where they are taught they are evil because they have a different position, whatever that may be, from whatever side it is.
Well, and now we're also getting into a weird space where teachers' hands are tied as to what they can teach, what they're allowed to say, what they're allowed to, and it's, I mean, quite frankly, when I graduated high school, I was very jaded about the school system. I was 18. I was pumped to vote. I was excited to go and vote on every single issue. And I remember specifically having a conversation with my mother one year when it came to the budget for education. And I told her, I said, I'm voting no because I was in that school system and they want new textbooks. I think I went through maybe a quarter of the book that year. So they want X, Y, and Z, but they don't utilize things to the full extent. They're, like you said, they're teaching to take tests. It was all about the standardized tests, the ACTs, the SATs, and I myself was not a very good test taker also. I can write essays like nobody's business. You guys know I love to talk, but as far as filling in those bubbles appropriately, that wasn't happening. So I came out of that very jaded. Not that I didn't have great teachers. I had great teachers, but again, they spent the majority of their time prepping for these stupid standardized tests. And yes. And like I said, now again, like given the political climate, it seems as though their jobs are even harder than before. And while we live in a society full of choices in certain aspects and in the school system, there are less and less choices available to us. And that's just a real shame. I mean, we're stifling creativity. I can go on too, but I'm just, all of that to say, I completely understand why people are kind of looking at the homeschool route and why things have changed in that regard. And again, like you said, and safety as well, not only from school shootings, but just the pandemic at large. Please.
Sure.
Every year, my friends' kids go back to public school after their summer break, and it's like, oh, yep, now the whole family's got a cold. Oh, yeah, now the whole family has a stomach bug. It's like clockwork. So I totally get it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that too, like, we're not people that have, I mean, obviously I don't want people to get sick. I use hand sanitizer. I do this, but we're not going to put ourselves in a bubble to avoid a cold or a stomach bug. You have to have all those antibodies, I guess, and immune system. Like, we're not going to stop our lives because it's wintertime.
Right.
We're not immunocompromised like that. But I do, and I think some people need to. My mom went through chemo recently, and we were a little bit more cautious than not. Again, I'm not an idiot, but I think that, for me too, we believe in keeping our kids a little bit more innocent. Like, we're probably still the last family standing that, as my daughter will be 15 in just a few short months, and we don't allow our kids to have social media.
Yeah.
In my job as a Mary Kay director, I literally battle every single day lifting up women that are grown women, grown,
yeah,
that battle anxiety, depression, the comparison game, fear of what other people think. Yeah. And when your brain is not fully developed until 21, 25, whatever they say it is now, and you give your kids this social media that damages them, there are no good studies saying that kids need social media.
Oh, 100%.
Right? Like, think about it like
yeah.
that. Like, no. So we're still the outlier in that. But I also, I just feel like the school system should be teaching reading, writing, arithmetic. However, I want, as a parent, to teach my children about sexuality, emotional control, morality, religion. I should be able to do that. Right? And you should be able to do it if you're opposite of me. And you should be able to teach your children what you want to teach them, right? Without it being a one-size-fits-all kind of situation. So, school was to teach world history and reading, writing, and arithmetic. And now a lot of it is not that. And the focus is on things that I want to teach my family more so than, based on my values. Yeah. Right. And I believe you should be able to do that too, even if our values are different. Yeah. Right. So that was the thing for me. But also being able to choose curriculum. They started taking away like AP classes and, advanced kids and gifted and talented, all those different things, academically talented. And both of my kids are reading and using curricula at several grade levels above. And now we're starting the college hunt. We're starting preparations for that era. Oh my gosh.
That's exciting though.
It is. And, we have, it's really nice. One of the stigmas is, homeschoolers don't get into college. And I have to tell you that couldn't be it's almost like saying Mary Kay's a pyramid scheme. No more false statement has ever been uttered. Colleges actually really do seek out homeschoolers. Because typically the curriculum is more rigorous. I mean, if I followed Connecticut's scope and sequence, which is what you're suggested to follow, if you want to stay kind of online and say like, okay, by this time in this grade, you should learn this, and this, and be able to have them communicate with peers their age, then you follow what's called the scope and sequence. But that brings me to another really important topic. I also felt like it was really just not natural to only be with children 6 months up or down your age.
Yeah. Okay. I can see that. Yeah. That makes sense.
Right. So if you're in a fourth grade class and what are you in fourth grade? 9, you might have some 8-year-olds, you might have some 9-year-olds, you might have some 10-year-olds, depending on what month it is and who was born when. Right. But by the time we all graduate, by the time year end comes, you can assume everybody's at 9, right? Give or take.
Right.
A few months. And when it really, the real world, I mean, I'm 39. Some of my best friends are 60.
Yeah.
Some of my best friends are 23.
Yeah.
Women that I work with span 18 to 70. My husband is 12 years older than me, and I met him at 19 years old. So I feel like it's unnatural to only be around those groups. Yeah. Right? Now, I do see value in same age peers.
Oh, sure.
Right?
Yeah, right.
There's certainly, I mean, my kids have a mix. There's times we say, okay, this is for, teenagers only. We're going to do a girls book club, must be 13 and up, right? Or, we're going to get together, do a bonfire for the boys. And it's, my son's 12. So we might say, 11 and up, or 11 to 13-year-olds, whatever, scale it however you want.
Yeah.
But I love that they get to learn amidst other people. So that brings me to socialization.
Yeah.
The $1 million question. Let me tell you, my kid's social life freaking infringes on my social life.
Yeah.
Like, I have to check with my kids before my husband and I go out to dinner. I'm like, so what do you have on the calendar for Saturday night?
Right.
We still have tons of friends in public school. We have tons of friends in private school. Our kids are very active in our church. So our church, we're very fortunate. We have a massive hundreds and hundreds of kids in a youth program that's phenomenal. They're both active in different sports.
Yeah.
Our son, both kids are passionate about martial arts. Allie's a full-blown black belt in Taekwondo, second degree. And Luke is involved in Hawaiian Kempo karate. Funny, also, through the Mary Kay realm, one of our consultants, her husband's a sensei. And I was looking and she was like, oh.
That's wild.
So, yeah. So, and then they both play your traditional sports. Luke does football and baseball. Allie does softball and basketball typically in a year. Allie loves music. She's had a song professionally recorded. And then, during the week we have, right now, Luke is at forest school learning survival skills out in the woods.
That's so cool.
Right. And then Wednesdays we go to Bible school. That's important to us. And again, other kids, other families, tons. I think there's 77 kids in the kids program. And then Thursdays we built a co-op. We got a bunch of moms that have the same values and same ideals. And now we have, I think it's something like 58 kids, 25 families. And we have a co-op for every Thursday from, 8:30 to 3 or so. It's, and we teach different subjects there.
Yeah. Were you guys horseback riding for a little while?
Yeah, so we did horseback riding in the pandemic.
Cool.
That was the only thing that was open.
Yeah, well, and I think you were referring them to as field trip Fridays. You would take the kids out, I love, because I'm the same way. I want to travel. I want to explore. I'm an extremely curious person. So that's part of this podcast. It kind of turned into this interesting job thing because I'm like, I don't know what you do. Tell me about it. And how did you get there? And why is it important? And what should people know about that? So eventually you guys are going to come to my job that I don't talk about on the show, but I
can't wait.
I would love to have you guys come out. So I think everyone, just like Mary Kay, has these preconceived notions and the stereotypes, and they want to put you in this box. So when they think homeschool, they just think kids and parents sitting at the dinner table over, textbooks and just miserable and just bored, or, you know what I mean? And, or parents confused about, what they should be teaching their kid, what level they're supposed to be at. But it's at the end of the day, it's what you make of it. And I just think it's really, like I said, that's why I wanted to share this with my listeners, because I think your story, while it's very unique, is also attainable if you're, using the proper resources and putting yourself out there. And it's not like you're just doing this all on your own. You're like you said, you're seeking out other people and saying, hey, what are you guys doing? And then you just figure out what works for you.
Absolutely. And we had a curriculum change where, and I think the onset of social media, while I am against it for my children,
sure,
prior to their brains being fully developed and understanding and emotionally stable, social media has been such a blessing for the homeschool community because, for example, we had picked a curriculum. It worked great last year. This year we started out and my son and I were just going head to head, man. It was every day was a struggle, and I'm trying to tell him to read this and he's like, I don't want to. And it was just it was an ugly week. And so, and I think a lot of parents see that in the public school system. Their kid comes home bummed, and maybe you're not sitting, my kids are also older. So they're a lot more independent. They're literate. They can read. They can, be self-sufficient to a degree. And so I said, all right, do you want me to look at a different curriculum? And he goes, I don't even know what I would want. I said, all right. So I went into a Facebook group that has thousands and thousands of people. And I said, listen, this is a few things about my son. This, this is what we're using. This is what I think is the problem. What you got?
Yeah.
I basically crowdsourced it, and I got a ton of response. And then I was able to filter it through like, okay, let's check out this. Let's check out that. Let's check out this. Let's check out that. And we landed on a curriculum that all of a sudden he now has a passion. He actually said to me last night, it was like, last night was like a moment where the heavens opened up and the skies sang. And he goes, Mom, will you read with me? And I'm like, what? Like the kid that, mind you, was told 4 years ago would never read, would be basically a total F up in the world, and, staying back in summer school. And we're reading The Outsiders, and he's 12.
That's awesome.
And we're having discussion about society and history and what things were like. And, all those things. We did the same thing with our daughter. We read To Kill a Mockingbird at 13 years old. And with a book club, we were able to talk about, modern day racism and historical racism and, all those different things. And, it really has empowered all of us, and we learn at the same time. A lot of people say, "Oh yeah, I'll send my kid back to public school in high school," and that is like my new mountain to go down on, because all the reasons why you don't want your kid in the public school just get exacerbated in high school.
Yeah.
But they think about sports. I want my kid to go to sports. I want my kid to go to prom. Case in point, prom. We have a homeschool prom. Early registration is due today. Last night I said, Al, you want to go? It's coming out. She's coming off on a trip. And she goes, yeah, I want to go. So we talked to another friend, and she's like, yeah, I want to go. So they're going to homeschool prom in May.
I love it.
Right? Like, you get that opportunity. They also, so my kids are involved in some really cool organizations that allow them to do mission work at different times. We're not on school break.
Yeah.
It allows us to do, that's near and dear to my kids. They're very passionate about missions, which is really cool. It also allows Allie's very into political science and government. I was a poli-sci major, history, politics, civics, government, that kind of thing. And so she is involved in an organization where they travel and learn different parts of legislation, the judicial branch, the executive branch. She did a week in DC by herself with this organization.
Yeah.
And she loves it. And it's like in the middle of September, where, typical.
Would never happen.
And it's also less expensive. I'm not stuck going to Disney the same week everybody else is in April.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're going to Greece and Turkey in September, smack in the middle of September.
That's fantastic.
Just because we can.
Yeah.
Right.
You guys, do you ever have just a lazy day where you just throw in an episode of Bill Nye the Science Guy?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
just to give it more of a public school feel,
Oh, absolutely. And we typically follow a public school calendar, so that like if there's like MLK Day or, whatever, Monday off or a break, the kids will kind of take that break, and so they can hang out with other friends that might be public, private, parochial, whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah. And then there's days when I'm just like, you know what, guys? Let's just snuggle up on the couch or go read a book. Or sometimes I'll be like, let's go skiing. Like randomly. Like I'll wake up and be like, you want to go skiing today? Like,
yeah.
Let's just take a mental health day. Let's take a break. Let's take a breather. Like the thing is, my kids are so, and the thing is, we only school for like 3 hours a day.
Well, that was going to be, that was going to be my next question. So break it down to me, break down the schedule and how it works in your household.
Yeah. So, Luke's curriculum is all online, which he thrives in. Allie, we tried that with. She was at Liberty University in their dual enrollment program. Got in with flying colors, beautiful situation. Couldn't learn based on their style of learning, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It was all online, and she's just not an online kid. She's more of a classic education kid.
Yeah. So
we found another curriculum with all sorts of books. The kid has hundreds of books all over the house. There's books everywhere. And that's how she learns. Actually, none of my kids are home right now. Luke's at forest school, and Allie goes, "Can I go to the library?" So I dropped her off at the library, and she's having a good old day. Brought
That's awesome.
Her stack of menagerie. I'm like, they're going to think you're moving in.
Yeah.
But she loves that. And she's like, I just need to get out of the house. She's almost 15. She's, made really great choices. She's got really amazing friends, again, from all walks of life.
Yeah.
And so our Mondays and Fridays are typically our home day. So Mondays, I kind of crank out school. Luke usually does a half an hour a day of a half an hour of each subject, hitting 4 to 5 a day.
Okay.
So he'll do a half an hour of engineering, half hour of math, half hour of language arts, half hour of world history. And then he'll cycle through some other ones. Like he has a robotics, he has a coding, he has a health and I think that's it. Something like that.
Yeah.
And he's all online, all independent. So I picked his classes, but he does a lot of stuff, and they grade it. They give it back. He gets a report card.
That's cool.
And he can crank at a pace that's comfortable for him.
Yeah.
So there's days he'll crank through 10 lessons because it comes a little more naturally to him. And then there's days he's like, Mom, I'm stuck on this,
Sure.
And then there's also tutoring available. I can message a professor and be like, hey, can I toss you some money? They have a scale, can you help him out with this? And so, you get a certain amount of free sessions and guidance, but then there's sometimes you might want to take advantage of a little bit more. And so he works through that. And then, so then, like I said, Tuesdays, typically forest school. Like he's off in the woods. I don't know what he's doing right now, but he's off learning how to survive. And I feel like at some point in my lifetime, I will definitely need him to help with that skill. Based after you watch Leave the World Behind. There you go.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And he's very hands-on. He needs to be out in the woods. He needs to be out in nature. And it's funny, just to bring this up, and I'm not saying there are not children with ADHD and depression and mental health disorders at all.
Yeah.
So don't twist what I'm saying here. But because my son was more active, and he was never disrespectful, never, disruptive,
Yeah.
but he was more active. He was diagnosed by teachers based on a 3-page checkbox that says always, sometimes, and never. He was fully medically diagnosed based on that. No neurology exams, no brain scans. And I know they have those, but we weren't privy to them.
Yeah.
Based on teachers, and a nurse told him he had ADHD and prescribed him Focalin. My kid turned into a zombie. We lasted a month. I pulled him off of it.
Yeah.
And I said, basically, this isn't how this is going to go. And now, last year, so 3 years into homeschooling, last year he went for his annual physical. And the doctor goes, he's not on Focalin, right? And they had some office changes, so she was really just reconfirming anymore, right? I said, no, he was only on it for that first month, and that's it. And she goes, yeah, this kid doesn't have ADHD.
Yeah.
Like, she's looking at him, she's talking to him, she's asking me the question, same form, always, sometimes, never.
Yeah.
She's like, there is not a single ADHD marker, whereas before there were a lot of always.
Yeah, sure.
And not so many nevers,
Yeah.
And so, and I'm not saying that homeschool cures ADHD, but I think a lot of times the public school system is just quick to diagnose because they want kids to be in a box.
Well, and also because the teachers themselves are overwhelmed. So when they they have one student that is standing out amongst the rest because they're overstimulated, or if they, quite frankly, have a higher IQ, they're bored out of their minds. So they're trying to find ways to entertain themselves. I have a friend who's going through it right now. Her daughter was diagnosed. Her daughter, absolutely, she's got the markers. She's got a whole lot going on. But now that they are, and the kids are younger, they both just are now entering public school. And now that her son is in public school, the teachers, same thing. The teacher said, oh, we think he's got to be evaluated. We think he has ADHD. And she's talking to me about it. And she's like, I can't believe it. Now I've got 2 kids. I said, your daughter has all of X, Y, and Z going on. Like, it's very obvious what she's got going on. Your son doesn't have any of that. No. I said, your son is hyperactive and he's curious, but it's very typical for his age group. It's very typical. And she's like, well, he does get, he's really overly stimulated. I said, yeah. Have you looked at society lately? That's just living in the world right now. We're all overly stimulated. I said, I think that's great that they want to take that time and they want to evaluate him. That's wonderful if they do find something. But I said, I'm pretty sure that's just one teacher being overwhelmed that day, and maybe he just, 100%. You know what I'm saying? So it's tricky. And I've had this conversation with my own therapist because like I said, we were talking about all of these things going on with her kids and with my friends' kids and everything. And my therapist even said they had been, at one point, they had been so quick to just blanket diagnose ADHD to any kid that was just a little more stimulated than another, to the point that now, like, legally, they can't even prescribe meds for kids that are under 6 because they were so overly diagnosed. Sure. So it's definitely something that people need to be aware. And again, with society, especially if you have full-time parents that are working, they're getting overwhelmed, and now they're being told this by the teacher, and they just kind of have to go with it because they don't have the luxury of homeschooling or getting a second opinion. They just don't have that time. So
absolutely. And in addition to that, you also run into, you know, the fact that like, and I didn't know what I didn't know till I didn't know it, but I learned like, wow, wait a second. This is a 3-page survey with very broad, always, sometimes never markers, right?
Yeah.
And you are literally going to prescribe medication to my child with, and you know, one of my best friends, her daughter just went through some serious brain scans to come up with like real ADHD markers, neurologist, like real testing. And I'm sitting here going, wait a second. I had a PA, and not to knock a good PA. Listen, I love my PAs, and I'm like, I have a sinus infection, I need a Z-Pack,
right?
You know, but you have a PA and a teacher saying, let's prescribe focal into a child without any legitimized neurological testing.
Yeah.
And I think there can be, based on that, you know, that survey, if you will, I think you could, you know, and again, not that the answer is right for everybody, but I think maybe say, okay, let's explore. Maybe if you have a certain amount of markers, let's get you tested.
Right.
Right. Before just, you know, playing the big pharma game, you know? So I think that's a big part of it too. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of been my journey. And it's also been really cool. There is a fun other aspect. I don't know if you want to talk about this on this,
go ahead.
This podcast.
Go ahead if you've got the time. I know you've got to go soon, but go ahead.
Yeah. You know, I think part of it is also being a member of the sober community, which, you know, and I'm not anti-alcohol, but I know that there's a lot of times when, you know, being, you know, part of that can be a little not mainstream. And so being able to, you know, I was on a very slippery slope, got into the mommy wine culture, which was almost at every PTA event. It was like cocktails, you know?
Yeah.
And so again, my husband drinks, like, you know, we're not anti-alcohol, but I just think I have an addictive personality, and I know that it's easy to be very, you know, all or nothing. And so, you know, as a sober mom in the community, it's really nice to be able to form my own events, and form my own things, and be able to support other women, you know, kind of in that environment, but also set that really great example for my kids, you know, for a long time. Absolutely. My kids were seeing a lot of things that they, you know, that I would look back and say, wow, I don't want my kids to think that's normal, you know? And we didn't have a crazy situation. I just finally, my dad died of cirrhosis, and I finally was just like, you know what, I'm done with this. You know, this could be a slippery slope. Yeah. And so, it's really nice to be able to also find your people and have control over that, instead of just being put in the box of, these are your kids' classmates, this is your PTA, this is your district, you know, and just be able to network and communicate a lot more freely, which is nice.
Yeah. Well, again, I know you've got to get going, but I really do appreciate you sitting down and having the conversation, because I love hearing different people's stories, different people's perspectives on the world. And I think yours is pretty unique. So again, you guys, this was my friend Sara. Thank you once again for joining us on Try Not to Curse, and we will catch you next time.